The National Business Initiative, also known as the NBI, has released the 7th Carbon Disclosure Project for 2013. Steve Nichols is head of the Climate Change and Water area at the NBI, joining us now to discuss these findings. Steve, first of all, the CDP and the NBI, all these abbreviations we have in South Africa, what is that? Give us the context.
So the CDP is an investor-led initiative based in London. They're a non-profit organization, and their goal is to create disclosure platforms for natural capital. So they look at climate change, they look at water, they look at forests, and they do that along a number of platforms. They ask companies to disclose information, they ask cities to disclose information, and then they have a big program on supply chains.
So who are these guys? Funded by who? International, local?
So they're funded partly by government grants and partly by sort of revenue from their products. But effectively, they represent $87 trillion of assets under management. So investors are understanding that climate change and water have a material impact on your business, and they're starting to want information to help value businesses, and this is where they're getting it.
Well, this is the CDP South Africa 100 Climate Change Report. That's what it's called. And the heading on the cover, South African business response to climate change, is it delivering? So that's the core of it, I suppose.
That's the core of it.
And so is it delivering?
Well, that's the key question. So the National Business Initiative is a local partnership of South African businesses seeking to be leaders in the sustainability field. So we work across job creation, skills, but also then environmental sustainability, and that's where this program comes in. So we send the questionnaire to the top 100 companies on the JSE by market cap, and the three key findings of the report are South African companies lead globally. We are leaders in transparency, so 83% of companies respond to the questionnaire, which is the second highest in the world after Europe. On performance, we lead. We have one of the highest median performance scores in the world. And the global top emitters have increased their emissions by 1.6% since 2009, whereas South African companies have decreased by 11%.
That's interesting. My impression was that we had very good intentions and a very aspirational law to make things work. And then people saying, well, you know, we can't have everything. We've got coal-fired power stations, we've got big things like ArcelorMittal. You know, you can't have everything, and we're still going to have to send out the emissions. But it sounds like we actually have achieved.
We've achieved a significant amount. I guess the key question is achieved relative to what? And so if you look at the emissions relative to what's required by science for us to stay below that critical 2 degrees centigrade increase, we're not achieving enough. And so the question is, how do we take these examples of really good practice, I mean this is leading global practice that South African companies are putting out, and improve it and become
Give
better.
me an example of a company that has really achieved.
So well, on the disclosure side, on the transparency side, two companies, Nedbank and Goldfields, achieved a perfect score of 100. And the score you need to get into what's called the Carbon Disclosure Leadership Index is 97% out of 100. So there are companies who are getting 90 and 92% who aren't even getting onto the index. So it kind of shows the competitiveness of disclosure.
Now, when it comes to carbon emissions and things like that, environmental, you mentioned Goldfields and Nedbank. Well done to them. Surely easier for Nedbank to achieve a good score than an industrial mining company like Goldfields.
Well, so that's potentially true. Obviously, you know, big industrial companies that have got process emissions and are exposed to trade do have a tougher time. On the other hand, they've got more emissions, so there's more options for them to reduce. And what we're seeing is that the real emissions reductions are actually happening in the industrials and the mining sector, partly because of increasing energy prices, so there's an economic incentive to do it, and partly because they understand the long-term risk of climate change. I mean, they're having to redesign infrastructure because floods are more frequent, because storms are more intense, and that's costing them serious money. I mean, there's the costs that are quoted are in the millions, hundreds of millions.
Now, you mentioned Nedbank and Goldfields as two of the saints. Do you mention the sinners? I mean, they're guys that just haven't made an effort and are failing in this.
Well, so I mean, that's the unique thing about this sample, is there's no one who's not making an effort and there's no one who's failing. We do name the companies that don't respond to the survey, and obviously we'd like to see a greater level.
Which of the big ones haven't, the important ones?
Most of the big emitters respond, which is great. I mean, between the top emitting companies plus Eskom, it covers about 60% of South Africa's emissions. So it really is a good representative sample. Our hope is that the companies that are lagging will pick up the report, will read through the good examples. You can download the full disclosures from each of the companies from the CDP website and try to learn, see what these companies are doing to get these kinds of improvements.
Well, board members need to see something like this. It should be part of every board pack, I would think. It's a great risk now if you don't do these things to the company, both in terms of operation and to your contribution to the economy. So this is available on the NBI or the CDP website, so you can Google them. I'm sure it'll come up straight away. That's Steve Nichols, who is Head of Climate Change and Water at the NBI, the National Business Initiative.